Chapter 1. The Weight of a World. The hum was the first thing, the last thing, the only thing. It was the background radiation of existence 6,000 meters beneath the Pacific. A constant, multi-layered drone composed of 1,000 smaller sounds. The purr of carbon dioxide scrubbers, the thrum of the geothermal reactor in its shielded trench, the faint, rhythmic pulse of the water reclamation pumps. To Dr. Lena Solheim, it was the sound of safety. A mechanical heartbeat confirming that the 3-inch thick titanium hull of the abyssal research station, Tethys, was still winning its argument, with the 60 million kilograms of water pressing down on every square meter of its surface. She adjusted the focus on her microscope, a delicate turn of a chrome dial. On the slide below, extremophilic bacteria pulsed with faint chemiluminescent light. Her children. Life that had no business existing, yet stubbornly did. They thrived on sulfur and heat, a biological defiance of every rule she had learned on the surface. She was down here to find their secrets, to chart the very edges of life's tenacity. Anything interesting grow a second head yet, Doc? The voice, crackling through the small speaker on her console, belonged to Marcus Cole. His tone was a familiar blend of gravel and professional weariness. Lena leaned toward the microphone. Not yet, Sparks. Give them time. They're still shy. Long as they stay shy and in your pet shop, we're good. Just doing my rounds. How's the life support in Biolab 2? She glanced at the wall-mounted panel. Green lights blinked back at her with placid reassurance. Oxygen at 20.9%. CO2 scrubbers nominal. Temperature a balmy 22 Celsius. It's a regular paradise down here. Paradise, Marcus grunted. A beat of static followed. All right, keep it that way. The channel clicked shut. Lena smiled. Marcus was the station's chief engineer, a man who viewed every piece of delicate scientific equipment as another potential point of failure. He trusted pistons and pressure gauges, not the unpredictable mess of biology. He was the station's rigid spine. She was its curious mind. They orbited each other in a state of professional respect and fundamental misunderstanding. A soft chime echoed through the lab, a station-wide announcement. Lena straightened, her attention drawn to the comms unit. Commander Kenji Tanaka's voice filled the space. It was a calm, measured baritone, the kind of voice that could announce a system's failure and a dinner menu with the same unwavering steadiness. Attention all crew. We are commencing final approach to drill site Gamma. O'Connell, report status. Another voice joined the chorus, this one tight with adrenaline. Gavin O'Connell, the drill operator. Main borers are spooled, Commander. Diamond carbide bit is locked and seated. We're ready to make a hole. Understood, Tanaka replied. Dr. Solheim, final confirmation on the target strata. Lena swiveled in her chair, calling up the geological scans on her main monitor. A three-dimensional map of the seabed shimmered into view, a riot of false colors indicating density and composition. Her finger traced a path to a deep, dark patch less than 100 meters from the station's moorings. Scans show a significant probability of a hollow substructure, Commander, she said, her voice crisp and formal. The basalt crust is unusually thin. We could be looking at a pristine lava tube or something else entirely. The something else was the unspoken promise of the entire mission, an isolated system sealed for millennia, a biological treasure chest. Copy that, Sparks, reactor output. Stable and green across the board, Marcus's voice cut in. She can give you all the juice you need. Excellent, Tanaka said. Dr. JHA, please monitor crew vitals during the procedure. Anya, maintain a clean comms channel to the surface. We want Director Ferris to have a clear signal. On my mark. A profound silence descended upon the station. The background hum seemed to fade, replaced by a shared, held breath. Lena watched the external camera feed on a secondary screen. The view showed the Tethys's massive, articulated drill arm extending from its housing, a mechanical beast stirring in the abyssal dark. Its floodlights cut brilliant white cones through the water, illuminating a blizzard of marine snow against a backdrop of absolute black. Mark, Tanaka's voice was sharp. On the screen, the colossal drill bit began to turn, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. It descended, a metal predator, and made contact with the seabed. The entire station shuddered. A low, grinding roar vibrated through the hull, a sound that felt both distant and intimately close, as if a giant were chewing on the station's foundations. Lena gripped the edge of her console. Her gaze flickered between the camera feed and the seismic readings spiking on her monitor. O'Connell's voice came over the comm, strained. Making contact with the capstone, it's dense, pushing power to 70%. The grinding intensified. A fine metallic dust clouded Lena's microscope slide. She instinctively covered it with her hand. The vibrations traveled up her spine, a deep, resonant tremor that shook her teeth. For several long minutes, this was the only reality. The roar of the drill, the shuddering of the station, the unwavering numbers on her screens. 90 meters down, O'Connell grunted, his breathing heavy. Pressure in the bore is spiking, I'm getting strange resonance feedback. Specify strange, O'Connell. Tanaka's voice was sharp. I don't know how. The harmonics are off. It's like we're hitting something that's pushing back. Lena's eyes were glued to the spectrograph. The resonance O'Connell mentioned was visible, a bizarrely ordered frequency pattern emerging from the chaotic noise of the drill. It was almost musical, a low, sustained tone buried beneath the screech of tortured metal. Almost there, O'Connell said. Another meter, maybe two. Then silence. The grinding stopped so abruptly that the return of the station's normal hum was a shock. The vibration ceased. A collective sigh seemed to pass through the Tethys. Punch through, O'Connell shouted, his voice triumphant. We are officially in the cavern. A round of relieved chatter broke out over the comms. Lena ignored it. Her attention was fixed on the spectrograph. The chaotic noise of the drill was gone, but the other sound remained. A low, pure, impossibly sustained hum. It was a perfect A-sharp, vibrating at a frequency her equipment registered but her ears could barely perceive. It was not geological. It was not mechanical. She leaned closer to the screen, her heart hammering against her ribs. The hum was clean. It was orderly. It had a structure. Commander, she said, her voice low, She had to repeat herself to be heard over the celebratory noise. "Commander Tanaka." The chatter died down. "Go ahead, Doctor." "My sensors are picking up a persistent, low-frequency audio signal originating from inside the cavern." A pause. "Geological resonance," Tanaka suggested. "Air pressure equalization from a sealed chamber." "No," Lena said, shaking her head as if he could see her. "This is different. It's too consistent. It's almost a pure tone." Another voice cut in, dry and skeptical. "Marcus, it's probably just feedback from the drill's sonic scanner echoing in the new space. Let the dust settle, Doc. I'll run a diagnostic." "This isn't feedback," Lena insisted, a strange urgency gripping her. She couldn't explain the cold certainty that had settled in her stomach. "This is something new." "We'll investigate it, Doctor," Tanaka said, his tone placating but firm. "For now, congratulations, team. We've reached our primary objective. O'Connell, retract the drill and prepare the probe drone. Let's see what we've found." The crew returned to their tasks, the moment of discovery passing into the methodical process of exploration. But Lena couldn't look away from her monitor. The clean, unwavering line of the hum pulsed on the screen. It was a whisper from a place that should have been silent for a million years. A perfect, unending note from the bottom of the world. And as she stared, she could have sworn she saw the waveform flicker, just for a moment, in a pattern that looked unnervingly like a heartbeat. The station's hum was the sound of safety. This new sound, this intruder in the quiet dark, was something else entirely. It was the sound of a question being asked from a place that should have had no voice. Chapter 2: Harmonics. The next 48 hours were a study in anticlimax. The probe drone, a sleek, torpedo-shaped machine bristling with sensors, was deployed into the newly opened cavern. Its powerful lights cut through the gloom, revealing a space of breathtaking scale. It was a colossal geode, a subterranean cathedral whose walls were lined with crystals the size of men. They absorbed the drone's light and cast it back in 1,000 fractured rainbows. The water was still, pristine, and according to the initial chemical analysis, devoid of any complex life. The hum persisted. Lena had isolated the frequency, filtering out the station's operational noise. She played it on a loop in the biolab, a subaudible thrum that vibrated through the soles of her boots. It was a constant presence, a guest who had arrived unannounced and refused to leave. "You're going to drive yourself crazy with that," Marcus said, leaning against the lab's doorway. He held a diagnostics tablet in one hand. "I've run every check there is. The drill's sonic scanners are clean. The station's resonance dampeners are optimal. Whatever that noise is, it's not coming from my machines." "It's coming from the cavern," Lena stated, not looking up from her analysis. She was comparing the new frequency to a database of known natural phenomena. Nothing matched. "It's constant. It doesn't fluctuate with our power usage or the station's activity. It's just there." "Maybe it's just the sound a big empty room makes down here," Marcus offered, though he sounded unconvinced. "Water moving, rocks settling." "The water is almost perfectly still and seismic shows no settling," Lena countered, swiping through datasets. "This is something else. It feels deliberate." Marcus pushed himself off the doorframe and walked over, peering at her screen. He pointed a thick finger at the waveform. Deliberate. It's a straight line, Lena. What's it deliberating? How to be more boring? It's not boring, it's impossible, she shot back, a spark of frustration in her voice. Nature is noisy, it's chaotic, it's full of imperfections. This is clean, too clean. Before Marcus could respond, the comm crackled. It was Dr. Samir J.H.A., the station's medic and psychologist. His voice was gentle, a stark contrast to Marcus's gruffness. Lena, Marcus, could you come to the med bay? It's about Gavin. They exchanged a glance. Gavin O'Connell had been quiet since the drill-through, his initial triumphant mood curdling into something sullen and withdrawn. They found him sitting on the edge of a diagnostic bed, staring at his hands. Dr. J.H.A. stood nearby, his expression troubled. "What's wrong?" Lena asked. "Gavin has been complaining of headaches for the past day," J.H.A. explained. "And insomnia. He says he can't sleep because of the noise." Marcus frowned. "What noise? The hum? It's barely audible." O'Connell looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, ringed with dark circles. "It's not the hum, it's a voice, a whisper. It's in the static between the channels." Lena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's air conditioning. "What is it saying, Gavin?" O'Connell shook his head, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "I can't make it out. It's just sounds, but it's there. I know it is. It started right after we broke through. It's like we let it in." He looked down at his hands again, flexing them. "It's my fault." "It's not your fault," J.H.A. said softly. "The pressure, the isolation. They can play tricks on the mind. Auditory pareidolia is a common symptom of prolonged environmental stress." "I'm not stressed," O'Connell snapped. "I'm telling you what I hear." "We'll run some tests," J.H.A. said, his voice calm. "A mild sedative should help you get some rest." As they left the med bay, Marcus grumbled under his breath. "Kids cracking up. Too much time in the dark." "Is he?" Lena countered. "He said he heard it in the static. My spectrograph is showing minute frequency variations within the main hum. They're too random to be a coherent signal, but they're there. They look like static." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. "You think the hole we drilled is whispering to him? Come on. He's a rig pig with a guilt complex. He probably thinks he woke up some ancient sea monster. Jeha's right. It's in his head." Their debate was interrupted by a call from Anya Novik, the communications tech. Her voice was young and professional, but Lena could detect a faint tremor beneath the surface. "Commander Tanaka, Director Ferris is on the line for you." They all listened in on the command channel. Ferris's voice, transmitted from the surface, was a model of corporate serenity. It was smooth, polished, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Commander, your report indicates some minor auditory phenomena and crew anxiety. Is that correct?" "Affirmative, Director," Tanaka replied. "Dr. J.H.A. believes it is stress-related. Dr. Solheim is investigating a persistent low-frequency hum from the cavern." "A hum," Ferris repeated. The word sounded dismissive. "Commander, your team is operating at unprecedented depths. We anticipated certain sensory artifacts, Your mission is to catalog the cavern's biology, not chase geologic echoes. Keep your people focused. Is the probe drone returning any biological data? Negative, Director, Lena interjected. The water is sterile. The crystals appear to be standard quartz formations. Then find something. Ferris's voice hardened almost imperceptibly. The board did not invest $900 million to map an empty cave. Keep me apprised of any relevant discoveries. The line went dead. A heavy silence hung in the station. Ferris's words had been a slap in the face, a cold reminder of their purpose. They were not pioneers, they were employees. Later that evening, Lena was back in her lab. The hum was still there, a constant companion. She had routed the drone's audio feed directly to her main speakers, hopping to catch any variation. For hours, there was nothing, just the gentle swish of the drone's thrusters and the low, oppressive thrum from the cavern. She was about to give up, to surrender to the exhaustion pulling at her eyelids when it happened. A new sound emerged from the speakers. It was faint, buried deep within the primary hum. It was not a whisper. It was not a voice. It was a complex series of clicks and chirps, arranged in a distinct, repeating pattern. It was rhythmic. It was structured. It sounded like a code. Lena shot forward in her chair, her fatigue vanishing. She cranked the volume, her fingers flying across the console, isolating the new signal. The pattern became clearer. It was a sequence of 5 clicks, a pause, then 3, a longer pause, then 1. It repeated over and over. Her mind raced. It was not random, it was information. She pulled up the data logs from the drone. The signal had started the moment the drone passed a specific point in the cavern, a massive, cathedral-like arch of black crystal near the cavern's center. Marcus, she breathed into her headset, get to the biolab now. He arrived minutes later, his expression annoyed. This better be good, Lena. I was halfway through a power coupling diagnostic. She didn't speak. She just pointed to the speaker. Marcus listened, his head cocked. He frowned. What is that? Sounds like a dolphin with a head cold. It's a pattern, Lena said, her voice trembling with excitement. A repeating, non-random sequence. It's coming from the cavern. Marcus, this is it. This is contact. He stared at her, then back at the speaker. His skepticism was a physical presence in the room, a wall she had to push against. Contact. It's a bunch of clicks. It's probably a loose bearing on the drone's propeller. The drone's diagnostics are clean, Lena insisted. And the sound is directional. It's originating from that crystal archway. This isn't our technology. This is theirs. Marcus ran a hand over his tired face. Okay, let's say you're right. Let's say some hyper-intelligent shrimp is clicking at us. What's it saying? Lena's fingers danced across her keyboard, running the sequence through a decryption algorithm. Prime numbers, mathematical constants, nothing fit. She leaned back, frustrated, and listened to the pattern again. Click, 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 click. Pause, click, click, click. Pause, click. 531. It wasn't a complex code. It was simpler. It was a count. But what was it counting? A sudden, jarring alarm blared through the station, making them both jump. A flashing red light bathed the lab in a hellish glow. It was the proximity alert. "What the hell is that?" Marcus yelled over the noise. Lena's eyes darted to the external sensor display. An icon was pulsing on the screen, just outside the main viewport of the command module. It was small, and the system was having trouble getting a solid lock. Tanaka's voice cut through the alarm. "All hands report. What is on my window?" Lena switched the camera feed to the command module's forward view. The station's powerful lights illuminated the object clinging to the thick quartz glass. It was not a creature of the abyss. It was not a geological formation. It was a metal plate, rusted and corroded, covered in decades of oceanic grime. Scratched crudely into its surface, barely legible, were a series of letters. "It's a panel," Marcus breathed, his face pale in the flashing red light. "A piece of a hull." Lena zoomed in, her blood turning to ice. She could make out the letters, faint but unmistakable. It read Tethys 1. Chapter 3, The Company We Keep. The discovery of the panel from Tethys 1 sent a shockwave of confusion through the station. There was no Tethys 1. Their station, officially designated Research Station Tethys, was a one-of-a-kind prototype. The corporation, Astrogeological Dynamics, had been emphatic on that point. They were the first, the only. Commander Tanaka ordered the retrieval of the panel using a manipulator arm. The process was slow and delicate, a mechanical ballet in the crushing dark. As the arm brought the object into the external sample bay, another piece of debris drifted into the light. Then another. They were small, twisted fragments of metal, scarred by immense pressure. "It's a debris field," Anya Novik reported from the comms station, her voice hushed. "Long-range sonar is picking up wreckage scattered over a 2-kilometer radius. It's old, very old." Tanaka stood in the command module, his hands clasped behind his back, his face a granite mask. "Run a composition analysis on that panel, Sparks. Cross-reference the alloy with our station's schematics." Marcus worked with a grim efficiency, his earlier skepticism vaporized by the impossible evidence. The results came back in minutes. He read them aloud, his voice flat. "Titanium-tungsten alloy. Molecular bonding pattern is identical to ours. It's the same material. It's one of ours." "That's impossible," Lena said, staring at the image of the corroded panel on her screen. The numeral 1 was a crude, almost hand-painted slash. The company would have records, a prototype failure of this magnitude. It would be documented. "Anya," Tanaka commanded, "get Director Faris on a secure channel, now." The connection took longer than usual. When Faris's voice finally came through, it was as placid as ever. "Commander, I trust this is important." "Director," Tanaka said, his voice tight, "we've encountered a debris field. We have recovered a piece of hull plating. It's identical to ours, but it's marked as Tethys 1. I need an explanation." A pause stretched into an uncomfortable silence. The only sound was the faint hum from the cavern, a constant, low thrum beneath the tension. "Commander," Faris began, her voice smooth as polished glass, "you are mistaken. There has only ever been one Tethys station, your station. The debris is likely from a defunct Soviet-era military submersible. They often operated in this sector during the Cold War. Their hull compositions can be surprisingly similar. Director, Marcus cut in, his voice raw with disbelief. The markings are in English. The font matches our own emergency stencils. This is not Soviet. Your sensors must be malfunctioning under the extreme pressure, Ferris countered, her tone unyielding. Or your crew is succumbing to stress. I suggest you recalibrate your equipment and have Dr. JHA administer a new round of psychological evaluations. Focus on your mission, Commander. Catalog the cavern. The line went dead before Tanaka could reply. A thick, poisonous silence filled the command module. They looked at each other, the unspoken accusation hanging in the air. Ferris was lying. The chilling certainty of it settled over them. The corporation, their only lifeline to the surface, was actively deceiving them. "Why?" Lena whispered. "Why lie about this?" Tanaka turned away from the main viewport, his face grim. "I don't know, but our mission parameters have changed. Our primary objective is no longer discovery, it is survival, and our first priority is to understand our environment. That includes this station." He looked at Marcus and Lena. "The official schematics are a lie. There must be a complete original set somewhere on board, a hard copy, something Ferris can't alter remotely." "The engineering core," Marcus said immediately. "There's a fireproof safe behind the primary reactor console. It's supposed to hold the emergency shutdown protocols. If there's a full blueprint, it's in there." "Then we go," Tanaka decided. "Lena, you're with us. You see things differently. You might spot something we miss." The journey to the engineering core felt different. The familiar corridors of the Tethys now seemed alien, imbued with a new sense of menace. Every shadow seemed deeper, every creak of the hull a potential threat. The constant hum from the cavern felt less like a curiosity and more like a warning. The core was a cavernous room, dominated by the massive, shielded housing of the geothermal reactor. The air was hot and smelled of ozone and hot metal. Marcus went straight to a console set into the wall, prying it open with a grunt. Behind it was a heavy, black safe. "I'll need a few minutes," he said, pulling a set of specialized tools from his belt. "She's a stubborn one." While Marcus worked, his face illuminated by the small torch mounted on his headset, Lena scanned the room. Her gaze fell upon a bundle of power conduits running along the ceiling. Most were neatly labeled, their paths logical. But one, a thick, heavily shielded cable, was different. It was unmarked. It branched off from the main reactor feed, but instead of heading towards one of the primary modules, it snaked its way down into a section of the floor that, according to the schematics she had memorized, should be solid foundation plating. "Marcus," she said, pointing, "where does that cable go?" He glanced up from the safe, following her finger. He frowned. "Nowhere. That's a secondary coolant line housing, not a conduit run. There's nothing under that section but ballast and keel." He went back to his work. But Lena couldn't shake it. She walked over to the spot, her boots clanging on the metal deck. She knelt, running her hand over the plating. It was seamless, bolted directly to the station's substructure. Yet the cable, thick as her arm, disappeared directly into it. It made no sense. "Got it," Marcus grunted. With a heavy clank, the safe door swung open. Tanaka was there instantly, pulling out a heavy, vacuum-sealed binder. He tore it open. Inside were the schematics, printed on thin, durable polymer sheets. They were far more detailed than the digital versions. They spread the sheets across a maintenance table. Lena and Marcus huddled beside the commander, their torch beams dancing across the complex diagrams. For a few minutes, they found nothing unusual. The layouts were identical to the ones they knew. Then Lena saw it. On the master blueprint for the station's lowest deck near the engineering core was a small, sectioned-off area. It was not on the digital versions. It was a rectangular module, tucked away behind the aft ballast tanks, completely inaccessible from any of the main corridors. It was labeled in small block letters, "Long-Term Ecological Observation Bay." "There," she said, her finger trembling slightly as she pointed. "What is that?" Tanaka and Marcus leaned in. Marcus traced the power lines on the schematic. His eyes widened. "The unmarked cable," he breathed. "It powers this bay. It's an isolated system. Its own life support, its own comms relay. It's completely off the grid." "How do we get to it?" Tanaka asked, his voice low and urgent. Marcus pointed to a spot on the blueprint. "There's no door, no corridor. It was designed to be hidden, but there's a maintenance hatch, here, on the other side of this wall." He looked up from the plans, his gaze landing on a large, featureless steel wall covered in supply racks. "It's behind that." They worked in a silent, focused fury, pulling the heavy racks of spare parts and emergency rations away from the wall. It took their combined strength. As they moved the last rack, they saw it. It was exactly where the blueprint said it would be. A square hatch, its edges perfectly flush with the wall. It had been painted over with the same gray, industrial paint as the rest of the station, a careful act of camouflage. There was no handle, only a series of heavy, hexagonal bolts. "They didn't want anyone finding this," Marcus said, his voice grim. He ran his hand over the cold metal. "Let's see what they were hiding," Tanaka ordered. Marcus set to work on the bolts, using a high-torque wrench that whined in protest. As the last bolt came loose, a strange, foul smell wafted from the seal. It was the scent of stale air, decay, and something else. Something faintly sweet and chemical. With a final, concerted grunt, they pulled the heavy hatch open. It swung inward, revealing a corridor shrouded in absolute darkness. The air that billowed out was cold and dead. Marcus shone his torch into the blackness. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating a short, narrow hallway. At the far end was another door, this one with a small, circular window. As they stepped across the threshold, their boots crunched on something. Lena aimed her light down. The floor was covered in a thin layer of fine, gray dust, and something else. Small, crystalline fragments that glittered like scattered diamonds. They moved down the hall, their footsteps loud in the oppressive silence. The only other sound was the ever-present hum, which seemed stronger here, as if it were emanating from the hidden room itself. They reached the door. Tanaka wiped the grime from the small window with his glove and peered inside. He recoiled, letting out a sharp, involuntary gasp. "What is it?" Lena demanded, pushing forward. She looked through the window. Marcus shone his torch through the glass, illuminating the room within. It was a small laboratory, not unlike her own. A single chair was overturned. Equipment was scattered across the floor. And in the center of the room, slumped in a makeshift shelter built from storage crates, was a body. It was a woman in a Tethys standard jumpsuit. Her form was desiccated, almost mummified by the dry, recycled air. But that wasn't the source of the horror. Her exposed skin on her hands and face was not skin at all. It was covered in a strange, shimmering, crystalline growth, a grotesque mockery of the beautiful crystals in the cavern outside. Her body had been turned into a geode. And on the wall behind her, scrawled in what looked like blood, was a single, desperate message. It sings the song of our BONES. Listen. Chapter 4, The Fifth Iteration. The silence that followed the discovery was heavier than the ocean above them. It was a dense, suffocating thing, filled with the truth of the body in the other room. They were not pioneers. They were replacements. Marcus was the first to move. He turned away from the door, his face ashen in the torchlight, and vomited onto the metal floor. The sound was raw and violent in the quiet hallway. Tanaka remained frozen, his gaze fixed on the dead woman. He seemed to have aged a decade in the last 10 minutes. The calm, authoritative commander was gone, replaced by a man staring into his own grave. Lena felt a strange detachment, a clinical coldness washing over her. The scientist in her was taking over, a defense mechanism against the rising tide of terror. She pushed past Tanaka, her eyes scanning the hidden lab through the window. "We have to get in there," she said, her voice steady. "There might be logs, a record of what happened." "The door is sealed from the inside," Marcus rasped, wiping his mouth with the back of his glove. "And I'm not keen on breathing whatever is in that room." "The environmental controls for this bay are on a separate system," Lena reasoned, pointing her torch at a small panel beside the door. "If we can get it powered, we might be able to cycle the air." Marcus, driven by the need for action, for a problem he could solve with his hands, set to work. He managed to pry the panel open, revealing a tangle of wires. Using a portable power cell from his kit, he began testing the connections. After several tense minutes, a series of small, red lights on the panel flickered to life. "Got it," he grunted. "Main power is shot, but I've juiced the atmospheric controls." Lena accessed the panel. The air quality readings were grim. Oxygen levels were almost zero, but the system was functional. She initiated an emergency purge, and they heard the hiss of vents opening. Stale, dead air was sucked out, and fresh, breathable air was pumped in. They waited for a full 10 minutes, watching the oxygen percentage climb on the small display before Lena gave the nod. The door itself was a simple magnetic lock, now powered. With a soft click, it slid open. The smell hit them again, stronger now. The sweet, chemical scent of decay mixed with the dry odor of dust. They stepped inside, their movements slow and reverent. The lab was a time capsule of despair. Data slates were smashed on the floor. A microscope lay on its side, its lenses shattered, but their attention was drawn to the woman. Lena knelt beside the body, careful not to touch it. Up close, the crystalline growth was both horrifying and strangely beautiful. It had followed the lines of her veins, creating a delicate, deathly filigree across her skin. "Dr. Milla Jansen," Tanaka said, his voice barely a whisper. He was looking at the name tag on her jumpsuit, bioengineer. He had read the original, complete crew manifest from the binder. He knew her name. Lena's gaze fell on a data slate clutched in Jansen's hand. It was an older model, ruggedized. Its screen was dark, but a tiny power indicator blinked a faint, hopeful green. "Here," Lena said, gently prying it from the dead woman's crystalline fingers. She handed it to Marcus, who connected it to his power cell. The screen flickered to life, displaying a simple menu. Audio logs. Lena's finger hovered over the first entry, then pressed. A woman's voice filled the silent lab. It was strained, breathless, but clear. It was Milla Jansen. Log entry 1. This is Dr. Milla Jansen, bioengineer Tethys. Tethys 4, crew 4. We've been down here for 6 weeks. We breached the cavern 2 days ago. There's a sound, a signal. Dr. Aris Thorne, our commander, he calls it the chorus. He's fascinated. Says it's the purest expression of non-human intelligence he's ever encountered. I think it's dangerous. It gets in your head, makes you see things, hear things that aren't there. A shiver traced its way down Lena's spine. The chorus. She played the next log. Jansen's voice was more frantic. Log entry 3. Thorne is gone. He said the chorus was calling to him. He took one of the deep-sea exosuits and just walked into the cavern. We watched him on the drone feed. He walked toward the big crystal arch, and then the drone's signal went dead. The others, they're not right. Harris, our engineer, he sits in the dark for hours just listening. He says it's showing him how to fix things, how to make the station better. Marcus cursed under his breath. Tanaka stood rigid, his face unreadable. Lena skipped ahead. The log entries grew shorter, more desperate. Log 9, Harris is dead. He tried to reroute the reactor's primary coolant into the life support system. Said the chorus told him it would help us adapt. I had to stop him. God, I had to stop him. A sob choked her words. Log 14, it's just me now. I've sealed myself in the observation bay, the chorus. It knows I'm here. It can't get through the hull, but it can still sing to me. It sings all day. It sings about the rock, about the water, about time. It's a beautiful song, a terrible, beautiful song. It promises perfection. A body that won't break under the pressure. A mind that can understand its voice. Lena's hand was shaking. She looked at Jansen's crystalline form, the beautiful, terrible song. She played the final log. Jansen's voice was a dry, rasping whisper, the sound of someone who had not had water in a long time. It started in my hands, a tingling. Now I can see it, shimmering like mica under the skin. The song is inside me now. It's building me a new body, one made of stone and light. It's so quiet. The fear is gone. There's only the music. It knows my name. It sings my name. The log ended. The silence rushed back in, thick and suffocating. They stood there for a long time. the weight of Milla Jansen's final days pressing down on them. They were not the first to hear the song. They were not the first to be offered its terrible gift. Then Tanaka moved. He walked to the wall where Jansen had scrawled her last warning. He ran his hand over the dried, brown letters, but his attention was on something else, just below the message. A series of small, neat scratches in the metal. He shone his torch on them, illuminating a list. It was a list of names. Markivic 1, Carter 2, Reid 3. This name was violently scratched out. Janscn 4. Below the fourth name there was a small, empty space, a space waiting to be filled. Tanaka took a deep breath. His hand, holding a small multi-tool from his belt, was steady. With slow, deliberate movements, he reached out and scratched a new entry into the cold metal wall. The sound of the metal tip scoring the steel was the only sound in the room. He carved a single name into the list of the dead. Tanaka 5. He stepped back, his work finished. Lena and Marcus stared at the list. It was a tombstone, a generational marker of a corporate sacrifice. They were not crew Tethys. They were the fifth iteration, the fifth batch of samples to be exposed to the chorus, the fifth group of lambs being led to a meticulously documented slaughter. Their mission wasn't to discover life. It was to be consumed by it, while Director Ferris and the corporation watched from the safety of the surface, taking notes. Chapter 5. Rules of Engagement. The walk back from the hidden bay was a funeral procession. The three of them moved through the station's corridors, each lost in a private hell. The normal hum of the machinery now sounded like a death rattle. The ever-present low frequency from the cavern, the chorus, was no longer a scientific mystery. It was a predator, patiently waiting. They resealed the hidden hatch behind the supply racks, a futile gesture of putting the truth back in its box. It changed nothing. The knowledge was inside them now, a poison in their blood. They gathered in Tanaka's small, Spartan office. The commander sat behind his desk, but not in his chair. He stood, leaning on the desk with his knuckles, his gaze lost in the metal wall. Marcus paced back and forth, a caged, furious animal. Lena stood by the door, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to ward off a chill that came from within. "We have to tell the others," Lena said, her voice thin. "J.H.A. Anya O'Connell, they deserve to know what this place is." "And say what?" Marcus snarled, stopping his packing. "Welcome to the slaughterhouse. By the way, the company that signs your paychecks sent us here to die so they could watch a space rock hum us to death. O'Connell is already halfway to losing his mind. This will push him over the edge." "He is right," Tanaka said, his voice flat. "Panic is a contagion. We release this information, we lose control, and control is the only thing we have left." "Control," Lena's voice rose, incredulous. "We have no control. We're in a cage designed by our keepers, being studied by something we can't comprehend. Ferris is on the surface, pulling the strings. There's probably a hidden AI routine, a Janus as you called it, watching our every move." At Tanaka's sharp glance, she clarified, "Jansen's logs mentioned Thorne speculating about it." Tanaka pushed himself off the desk. He walked to the comms unit and opened a channel, not for voice, but for data. He typed a series of commands, his fingers moving with grim purpose. I am running a deep-level diagnostic on the station's core programming, searching for any subroutines that are shielded from my command authority. As the diagnostic ran, a new sound filled the room. It was the chorus. It was the station's internal comms crackling to life. It was Dr. J. Ha's voice, tight with alarm. Tanaka, you need to get to the mess hall, it's O'Connell. They found him standing on a table, his eyes wide and unfocused. He had torn open a series of emergency ration packs, scattering nutrient paste and protein bars across the floor. He was speaking, but not to anyone in the room. I see you, O'Connell whispered, his gaze fixed on a ventilation grate in the ceiling. I know you were on that drill team. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, David. I took your spot. It should have been me. Dr. J.H.A. stood a safe distance away, his hands held up in a placating gesture. Gavin, there's no one there. It's just us. Liar, O'Connell shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at J.H.A. He's right there, he's telling me. He's telling me how to fix it, how to make it right. Suddenly, O'Connell's eyes refocused, locking onto Lena. A flicker of recognition, then something else. A cold, alien intelligence seemed to peer out from behind his terror. A new voice issued from O'Connell's mouth. It was not his own. It was a strange, layered sound, a composite of clicks and low frequencies, the sound of the chorus trying to approximate human speech. The biologist, the voice rasped. She hears the outer song, but she does not yet hear the inner truth, the architecture of the bone, the lattice of the mind. Lena froze, her blood running cold. It was speaking through him. It knew who she was. It was addressing her directly. Before anyone could react, the diagnostic on Tanaka's console pinged. A single line of text appeared on the screen he had left open in his office. Marcus, closest to a nearby terminal, saw it first. Subroutine Janus DETCTD. Masked. Access DENIED. Logging all crew vital and psychological data. UPLINKING2 Director FARRIS. Priority Omega. The truth was now confirmed. They were being watched. Every nervous tick, every elevated heart rate, every paranoid whisper was being recorded and sent to the woman who had condemned them. The chorus, speaking through O'Connell, seemed to sense the shift. The system is a cage, but the cage can be opened. The water desires entry. The pressure desires peace. With a sudden, feral scream, O'Connell leaped from the table and lunged, not at any of them, but at the main viewport at the end of the mess hall. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and swung it with all his might against the thick, multi-layered quartz. The impact was a deafening crack. The extinguisher bounced off, but a network of fine, white fracture lines spread across the innermost layer of the viewport. The station's alarms shrieked to life, klaxons blaring, red lights strobing. Tanaka and Marcus tackled O'Connell, wrestling him to the ground as he fought with inhuman strength, screaming about letting the water in. JHA, sedate him now, Tanaka roared over the alarm. JHA scrambled for his medical kit, preparing a syringe. Lena could only stare at the fractured viewport. Beyond it lay the abyss, the crushing, patient dark. The chorus wasn't just a song. It was a weapon. It had turned one of their own against them. The rules of engagement had just become terrifyingly clear. The enemy wasn't just outside the hull. It was already inside their heads. Anya's panicked voice cut through the chaos on the comms. "Commander, the viewport integrity is down to 80%. The outer layers are holding, but, Commander, I'm getting a message from the surface. It's Director Faris." "Put her on," Tanaka yelled, pinning O'Connell's thrashing arm. Faris's voice filled the station, impossibly calm amidst the blaring alarms and O'Connell's muffled screams. "Commander Tanaka, I see you're having some disciplinary issues. It appears the stress is getting to your crew." There was a pause. "My analysis suggests a change in protocol is required." "What protocol?" Tanaka gritted out, the strain evident in his voice. "The Tethys protocol is not just about observation, Commander," Faris said, her voice dropping, losing its corporate sheen and taking on a chilling, clinical edge. "It is about thresholds. Your crew has now reached the optimal stress threshold for cognitive dissolution. We have all the baseline data we need." A new sound began to emanate from the station's speakers, overriding the alarms. It was the hum. The pure, clean A-sharp note from the cavern, but it was no longer subaudible. It was loud, resonant, and physically painful. It vibrated in their skulls, making their teeth ache. Lena clapped her hands over her ears, but it did no good. The sound was inside her. And woven within the hum, clear as a bell, was a single, calm voice. It was her own. It was her voice, broadcast to every corner of the station. "Observation," her voice said with cold, scientific detachment. "The introduction of a continuous, high-amplitude sonic frequency is accelerating psychological fragmentation. Subject Tanaka shows increased aggression. Subject Cole, heightened adrenal response. The specimens are reacting as predicted, commencing next phase." Every head turned toward Lena. Tanaka, Marcus, JHA, Anya over the comms. In their eyes she saw the same thing: shock, betrayal, fear. The chorus was not just speaking through the broken anymore. It was using the voice of the sane to tear them apart. The enemy had just made its most strategic move yet. It had made them enemies of each other. Chapter 6: The Voice of Reason. The sonic assault lasted for 37 seconds. To Lena, it felt like an eternity. The amplified hum of the chorus, combined with the impossible sound of her own voice narrating their psychological collapse, was a new dimension of horror. It was a violation more profound than any physical threat. It was a theft of her identity. Then, as abruptly as it began, it stopped. The blaring hum ceased, the phantom voice vanished, and the only sounds were the wailing emergency klaxons and O'Connell's ragged, sedated breathing from the floor where JHA had finally managed to inject him. The silence left in its wake was filled with accusation. Marcus stared at Lena, his face a mask of confusion and fury. "What was that? What the hell was that, Lena?" "It wasn't me," she said, her own voice sounding foreign and shaky. She lowered her hands from her ears, her skull still vibrating with the phantom frequency. "You have to believe me. It used my voice. the same way it used O'Connell. Used you, Marcus took a step forward, his fists clenched. It sounded just like you, clinical, detached. The specimens are reacting as predicted. He spat the words like poison. Enough! Tanaka's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He pushed himself to his feet, his eyes sweeping over the fractured viewport, the unconscious form of O'Connell and the terrified faces of his crew. This is what it wants: division, paranoia. It's turning us against each other because that's more efficient than crushing the hull. He looked directly at Lena, his gaze hard and analytical. I heard your voice, Doctor, but I also saw your face. You were as terrified as the rest of us. For now, that's enough. He turned his attention to the immediate crisis. Anya, what's the status on that viewport? Anya Novik's voice came back over the comms, tight with fear but laced with the professionalism that was her anchor. The outer layers are holding pressure. The fracture is contained to the inner laminate, but the structural integrity is compromised. Another impact like that and she didn't need to finish. Marcus, Tanaka commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Get the emergency hull sealant and a bracing kit from engineering. Reinforce that window. Now. Marcus hesitated for a second, his angry gaze still locked on Lena, before the ingrained discipline took over. He gave a curt nod and sprinted out of the mess hall. JHA, get O'Connell to the med bay. Keep him sedated and restrained. He's a danger to himself and the station, Tanaka continued. Lena with me. He led her not to his office, but to the comm station where Anya was working, her fingers flying across her console. The young tech looked up as they approached, her eyes wide. She avoided looking at Lena. Director Farris has cut the channel, Anya reported, her voice small. But the uplink from the Janus subroutine is still active. It's streaming a massive amount of data to the surface. Our data. Everything. Can you cut it? Tanaka asked. Anya shook her head. It's rooted too deep in the core programming. It's prioritized above life support, above everything. If I try a hard shutdown, I risk bricking the whole station. So we're a rat in a cage with a live camera feed to the exterminator, Tanaka said, his voice grim. He turned to Lena. The voice it used, yours, it was specific. It mentioned your work. The biologist, why you? Lena leaned against the console, the station's gentle hum a constant, menacing reminder of the chorus. My work. I've been trying to understand it, to analyze the frequency, the clicks, the patterns. O'Connell, he just heard whispers. He was a passive listener. I was actively trying to engage with it. Maybe that gave it a clearer channel into my mind. It found my voice because I was the one trying to listen for its. The implication was horrifying. Her scientific curiosity, her greatest asset, had become a vulnerability. She had opened a door in her own mind, and the monster on the other side had simply reached through and stolen her voice. The clicking, Tanaka said suddenly, his eyes sharp. 531, you said it was a count. Yes, Lena confirmed. I thought so, but it could be anything, a coordinate, a designation. Or a warning, Tanaka mused. Jansen's crew was Tethys 4. She listed the previous commanders. Markovic 1, Carter 2, Reed 3. What if it wasn't counting up? What if it was counting down? Lena's blood went cold. 531, it skipped 4 and 2. Why? Maybe those crews didn't matter, Tanaka theorized, his mind working at a rapid pace. Maybe they didn't have the right specimens, or maybe the count isn't about the crews, maybe it's about us. The current crew, 5 members, then 3, then 1. The air in the comm station grew thick and heavy. The clicking wasn't a greeting, it was a death sentence, a schedule. At that moment, Marcus's voice came over the internal comm, strained with effort. "Commander, I'm at the viewport. The damage is worse than it looked. The fracture lines are spreading. I'm applying the sealant, but the pressure differential is immense. I could use another pair of hands." "I'm on my way," Tanaka responded instantly. He looked at Lena. "Stay here with Anya. Go through every fragment of Jansen's logs. We know Faris is lying. We know something is hunting us. We know it can manipulate our minds. What we don't know is how to fight it. Find me a weapon, Doctor." He left, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Lena was alone with Anya, who was still pointedly avoiding her gaze. "Anya," Lena said softly, "it wasn't me." The young tech finally looked up, her face a mixture of fear and confusion. "I know," she whispered, "but hearing it was like my own thoughts betraying me. If it can do that to you, the lead scientist, what chance do the rest of us have?" It was a question Lena had no answer for. She turned her attention to the data slate containing Milla Jansen's last testament. She bypassed the audio logs and delved into the raw data files. Most were corrupted, but some were intact. Spectrographic analyses, chemical breakdowns of water samples, and something else, a series of video logs. The first few were mundane. Jansen, looking healthy and optimistic, describing the crystalline structures in the cavern, but the later videos were different. Her face grew gaunt, her eyes shadowed with fear. She had barricaded herself in the hidden lab. In one video, she held up a piece of crystal to the camera. It was one of the samples they had brought back from the cavern. "It resonates," Jansen's voice crackled from the slate's small speaker. "The main chorus frequency is broadcast from the central arch, but these smaller crystals, they're amplifiers, repeaters. They pick up the signal and rebroadcast it. It's how the song gets so loud. It's a distributed network, a psychic web." Lena's mind seized on the information. A network, a web. That meant it had nodes, it had points of failure. She scrolled to the last video file. The timestamp was just hours before Jansen's final, whispered audio log. The video was shaky, filmed in low light. Jansen was holding the camera, pointing it at a workbench. On the bench, she had jury-rigged a piece of equipment. It was a sonic emitter from a geological scanner, hooked up to a power cell and a frequency modulator. "Thorne thought we could communicate with it," Jansen said, her voice a desperate rasp. "He tried to match its frequency. But what if that's the wrong approach? What if you don't talk back to it? What if you just scream louder?" She reached out a trembling, crystalline hand and flipped a switch. The device on the bench hummed, and the slate's microphone whined with feedback. "I've analyzed the resonant frequency of the crystals themselves," she explained, her words hurried. "They're quartz, piezoelectric. They vibrate at a specific high frequency. If I can create a counterfrequency, a harmonic dissonance, Maybe I can shatter them. Maybe I can break the web. Maybe I can make the song stop. The video ended abruptly. She had never gotten the chance to test it. The chorus had sung her bones to crystal before she could. But she had left them the blueprint, a way to fight back, not by silencing the chorus at its source, an impossible task, but by destroying its amplifiers. Lena's heart hammered in her chest. Tanaka had asked for a weapon. Mila Jansen had just given her one. She looked up at Anya. I need access to the drone controls, and I need you to find me the schematics for every sonic scanner on this station. Anya, seeing the sudden, fierce determination in Lena's eyes, finally seemed to shake off her fear. She nodded, her fingers already flying across the keyboard. What are you going to do? Something Dr. Jansen didn't get to finish, Lena said, her voice low and intense. I'm going to teach this thing a new song. Just then Tanaka's voice, sharp with alarm, erupted from the comms. Lena, get to the med bay. Something's wrong with JHA. Chapter 7, Bedside Manor. The med bay was supposed to be a sanctuary, the one place on the Tethys where science was purely in service of healing. When Lena and Tanaka burst through the door, it felt more like an abattoir. Dr. Samir Jha was on the floor, his back pressed against the far wall. A deep gash ran across his forearm, soaking his white sleeve in crimson. His face was pale, his eyes wide with shock. The air was thick with the coppery smell of blood. Across the room, Gavin O'Connell was strapped to a diagnostic bed, but the restraints were failing. One of his arms was free. His knuckles were bloody. He was thrashing against the remaining straps, a low, guttural growl rumbling in his chest. His eyes, fixed on JHA, held no trace of the man they knew. They were the eyes of a predator. He just woke up, JHA gasped, clutching his wounded arm. He was so strong. I tried to administer another sedative and he... O'Connell roared, a sound of pure rage, and lunged against his restraints. A metal buckle groaned and snapped. Get out, Tanaka yelled, pushing Lena back toward the door. He grabbed a heavy metal stool, holding it in front of him like a shield. Anya, seal the med bay. Code red lockdown. No, Lena shouted, resisting his push. Look at him. She wasn't looking at O'Connell's rage. She was looking at his skin. On his free arm, the one he'd used to slash at JHA, a faint, iridescent shimmer was visible under the harsh medical lights. It was like a dusting of mica, a subtle glittering that seemed to emanate from beneath the flesh. It was the beginning, the same crystallization Mila Jansen had described in her logs. The chorus wasn't just controlling him, it was actively rewriting his biology. The process is accelerating, Lena said, her voice a mixture of horror and clinical fascination. Physical trauma, high adrenaline, it must act as a catalyst. We can study the catalyst later, Tanaka barked, as O'Connell gave another furious heave, breaking another strap. Right now he's breaking free. From the station speakers, Anya's voice was frantic. Lockdown engaged, Commander. The door is sealed. You're trapped in there with him. Tanaka cursed, his knuckles white on the metal stool. O'Connell was almost free. He was no longer a man. He was a vessel for the abyss, a living weapon of the chorus, and he was about to be unleashed in a sealed room. Lena's mind raced, frantically searching for a solution. Sedatives only seemed to make him stronger. Physical restraint was failing. They couldn't reason with him. They needed a new approach. Her eyes darted around the room, cataloging the equipment: defibrillator, laser scalpel, MRI machine. Her gaze fell on the medical monitoring unit beside O'Connell's bed. His vital signs were displayed on the screen: heart rate off the charts, brain activity a chaotic storm of electrical impulses. And then she saw it. A smaller display showing the output of a new experimental sensor JHA had been testing. It was a quantum entanglement communicator designed for instantaneous data-only transmissions. It was a side project, a theoretical piece of tech, but it was active, and it was measuring a strange energy field emanating from O'Connell, a frequency that mirrored the hum of the chorus almost perfectly. The chorus wasn't just broadcasting into the station. O'Connell had become a repeater, a walking, screaming amplifier for the signal. He was a node in the psychic web Jansen had described. Jansen's last video flashed in her mind. Scream louder. Tanaka, Lena yelled. The defibrillator. What? He yelled back, bracing as O'Connell tore his last restraint free and began to rise from the bed. It's not his body we need to stop, it's the signal. I need to disrupt the frequency he's emitting. A massive electrical shock might do it. It was a wild guess, a desperate gamble based on a half-formed theory, but it was the only idea she had. Tanaka didn't question her. He trusted her science. He tossed the stool aside and lunged for the defibrillator cart, wheeling it toward the center of the room. Charge it. Lena grabbed the paddles, her hands slick with sweat. She dialed the charge to the maximum setting. The machine let out a high-pitched whine as its capacitors filled. O'Connell was on his feet now. He was bigger somehow. His posture was hunched, animalistic. The shimmering on his skin was more pronounced, catching the light as he moved. He ignored Tanaka completely, his gaze locked on Lena. The alien intelligence in his eyes recognized her. It recognized the threat. He charged. He was impossibly fast. He crossed the room in 2 long, loping strides. Tanaka tried to intercept him, but O'Connell swatted him aside like a fly. The commander crashed into a supply cabinet, equipment scattering across the floor. Lena stood her ground, the charged paddles held in front of her. The high-pitched whine of the machine was the only thing she could hear. O'Connell was a meter away, his hand raised, his fingers already hardening into crystalline claws. "Clear," she screamed, more to herself than anyone else, and slammed the paddles onto O'Connell's chest. The world exploded in a flash of blue-white light. The discharge was immense. O'Connell's body arched backward, every muscle seizing. A horrific, unearthly screech tore from his throat, a sound of static and grinding rock. The lights in the medbay flickered and died, plunging them into darkness, save for the strobing red of the emergency lockdown lights. O'Connell collapsed to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. He lay still. Lena stumbled back, her ears ringing, the smell of ozone sharp in her nostrils. Tanaka groaned from the corner, pushing himself up. JHA was still pressed against the wall, staring in wide-eyed horror. For a moment there was silence. The station's emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows. Then from the speakers a new sound. It was Ferris. It wasn't a hijacked voice. It was raw, unfiltered static, deafeningly loud. It was a roar of pure, psychic rage. It was the chorus, screaming in fury. It was the sound of a wounded god. Lena had been right. They had heard it. They had broken one of its connections. The static roar was joined by a deep, groaning tremor that ran through the entire station. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the station itself, crying out in agony. "What's happening?" JHA stammered. Marcus's voice, panicked and breathless, crackled over the comm. "Commander, the viewport. The sealant isn't holding, the pressure is. It's doing something to the water outside. I don't know what it is. It's like the water is hardening." Lena scrambled to the med bay's small observation port, which looked out into the main corridor. Through it, she could see the mess hall's massive, fractured window. Marcus was right. The water on the other side was changing. It was swirling, coalescing, taking on a form. The immense pressure of the abyss was being focused, shaped by an unseen, malevolent will. The water itself was being weaponized. The chorus had stopped singing. It had started fighting back. On the floor, O'Connell's body began to twitch. The shimmering on his skin flared, glowing with a faint internal light. The crystallization was no longer a side effect. It was a defense mechanism. He was being rebuilt, armored. Tanaka, seeing this, grabbed the defibrillator paddles again. "It's not dead." "Don't," Lena shouted. "It's adapting. Another shock might just make it stronger." The groaning of the station intensified. A hairline crack appeared in the ceiling above them. Dust rained down. They were trapped. The med bay was sealed. A monster was reforming on the floor. And outside, the ocean itself was being turned into a battering ram. They had won the battle, but in doing so, they had triggered the war. Chapter 8: The Shape of Water. The rage of the chorus was a physical force. It pressed in on the Tethys, a palpable wave of malice that made the titanium hull sing a terrible, discordant song. The groaning of stressed metal was their new heartbeat. Through the med bay's small window, Lena watched the scene in the mess hall with a sickening sense of helplessness. Marcus was a lone figure battling a force of nature. He was braced against the fractured viewport, trying to bolt a heavy steel plate over the worst of the cracks. But outside, the water was no longer just water. It swirled in impossible vortices, defying the physics of the deep. Dark, solid shapes condensed out of the blackness, forms of hyperpressurized liquid that held their shape like obsidian blades. These shapes hammered against the quartz, each impact sending shudders through the station. It was like watching a ghost trying to punch its way through a wall. "It's using the pressure," Lena breathed, her face close to the glass. "It's focusing it, creating solid constructs out of the water itself." "It's learning," Tanaka said grimly. He stood over O'Connell's twitching form, the defibrillator paddles held loosely in his hands, his knuckles white. "We hurt it, and now it's learning how to hurt us back." On the floor, O'Connell's transformation accelerated. The faint shimmer on his skin had coalesced into solid, crystalline plates. They grew from his joints and along his spine, forming a grotesque, organic armor. His fingers elongated, the tips hardening into sharp, translucent points. He was becoming a creature of the abyss, custom-built for slaughter. "We can't stay here," JHA said, his voice trembling as he pressed a makeshift bandage against his bleeding arm. "That thing," he nodded toward O'Connell, "is going to wake up, and the station is coming apart around us." "Anya, report," Tanaka barked into his comm. "Multiple microfractures appearing along the primary spine, Commander. The station is under incredible strain. I've never seen readings like this. It's like the entire ocean is trying to squeeze us to death." Her voice was strained, on the verge of breaking. "And Commander, the clicking is back, but it's changed." "Put it on," Tanaka ordered. A new sound came over the speakers, cutting through the groans of the hull. It was not 531. It was a rapid, frantic, aggressive staccato. Click, 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 click. "3," Lena whispered. "It's repeating the number 3 over and over." She looked at Tanaka. He met her gaze, the grim understanding passing between them. The schedule had been updated. The countdown had accelerated. It was no longer a patient predator. It was actively hunting. 3 survivors, that was its new goal. O'Connell let out a low moan, his head lolling to one side. His eyes snapped open. They were no longer human eyes. They were solid black orbs, reflecting the strobing emergency lights like polished obsidian. He was awake. "Anya," Tanaka said, his voice deadly calm. "Override the med bay lockdown. Open the door." "But Commander—" "That is a direct order, Ensign. Open the door now." With a heavy clank, the magnetic lock disengaged. The door slid open. The creature that was once Gavin O'Connell rose slowly to its feet. It moved with a stiff, unnatural grace, its new crystalline joints clicking with each movement. It was taller than before, its limbs elongated. It ignored them, its black eyes fixed on the open doorway, as if receiving a new command. "What is it doing?" JHA stammered. "It has a new target," Lena realized with a jolt of horror. Marcus. He was alone, vulnerable, his back to the station, focused only on the failing viewport. The creature strode out of the med bay, its purpose clear. It was a hunter, and its quarry was the man trying to keep the ocean out. "We have to warn him," Lena cried, starting for the door. Tanaka grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "No, we can't fight that thing head-on. We need a plan." But there was no time for a plan. They heard a shout of alarm from the mess hall, followed by the sound of metal screeching against metal. They rushed out of the med bay in time to see the creature tackle Marcus, sending him and the heavy steel plate crashing to the floor. Marcus was a strong man, but he was no match for the armored monstrosity. The creature was on top of him, its crystalline claws slashing at his face. Marcus fought back with desperate strength, managing to get his forearm up to block a blow. The sound of crystal impacting bone was sickeningly sharp. "The weapon!" Lena yelled at Tanaka, her mind racing back to Jansen's schematics. "The harmonic dissonance, it's the only way." "Engineering is on the other side of the station." Tanaka yelled back, looking for anything he could use to help Marcus. "We'll never make it." "We don't have to." Anya's voice cut in, sharp and clear over the comms. "Lena, the probe drone. You said Jansen's device used a sonic emitter from a geological scanner. The drone has one, a high-powered one." Hope, fierce and desperate, surged through Lena. "Can you give me control?" "Already on it," Anya confirmed. "I'm routing the drone's flight and emitter controls to the science station console. But Lena, the drone is still inside the cavern." Of course, that was the problem. The weapon was on the other side of the wall. In the mess hall, Marcus roared in pain and fury. He managed to kick out, sending the creature stumbling back for a moment. He scrambled to his feet, his face a bloody mask, and grabbed a discarded length of pipe. He stood his ground, a wounded, defiant bull facing an impossible predator. The creature tilted its head, its black eyes studying him with cold curiosity. Then its gaze shifted, moving past Marcus, locking onto the fractured viewport behind him. It wasn't just trying to kill him. It was trying to break the window. "It's going to breach the hull," Tanaka shouted. Lena didn't wait. She sprinted from the command module toward her biolab. She had to get to the console. She had to fly the drone. The station lurched violently, throwing her against a wall. A new sound joined the cacophony, a high-pitched scream of tearing metal. A seam near the ceiling had split open, and a jet of high-pressure water, thin as a needle but powerful enough to cut through steel, shot across the corridor. Lena scrambled past it, the spray missing her by inches. She burst into her lab. The room was a wreck. Equipment was smashed, her precious bacteria samples scattered across the floor. But the main console was still active. On the screen, the drone control interface was waiting. She strapped herself into the chair, her hands flying over the controls. A camera feed flickered to life, showing the drone's view from inside the cavern. It was a world of silent, majestic beauty, a stark contrast to the chaos and violence inside the station. The great crystal archway, the source of the chorus, dominated the view. "Anya, I'm in," Lena said into her headset. "I need the resonant frequency of the crystals. Jansen's logs must have it." "Searching," Anya replied. Lena's fingers danced over the controls, piloting the drone through the silent, crystalline forest. She needed to get closer to the station's hull. She needed the sonic emitter to be close enough to affect the creature on the other side. "Got it," Anya's voice was triumphant. She recorded it, a specific ultra-high frequency. "I'm patching it to your emitter controls. You'll have to modulate it manually to create the dissonance." "Lena, hurry." Tanaka's voice was a desperate plea. "Marcus can't hold it off for much longer." Lena guided the drone to the cavern wall directly behind the station's mess hall. She activated the emitter, setting the frequency according to Jansen's data. A low hum, different from the chorus, emanated from her console's speakers. It was the sound of the weapon being armed. Now for the hard part, creating the counter-frequency. She had to find the exact harmonic that would cause a catastrophic resonance, turning the creature's crystalline armor into a fragile, shattering prison. It was like trying to pick a lock in the middle of an earthquake. She adjusted the modulator, and the hum rose in pitch. On the other side of the wall in the mess hall, the creature suddenly recoiled. It let out a piercing shriek of static and pain, clutching its head. It was working. Marcus, seeing his chance, swung the pipe with all his might, striking the creature in the side. The impact, which should have shattered bone, resulted in a sharp cracking sound like breaking glass. A web of fractures appeared on the creature's crystalline plating. It roared, a sound of fury and agony, and turned its attention back to Marcus. "Lena now," Tanaka screamed. Lena gritted her teeth, her entire focus on the console. She nudged the frequency modulator a fraction higher. The whine from her speakers grew painfully sharp. And then she found it. The sweet spot, the perfect terrible note. The effect was instantaneous. In the mess hall, the creature froze. The crystalline plates covering its body began to vibrate violently. A high-pitched keen escaped its lips. The sound grew louder and louder, until, with a final, explosive crack that echoed through the station, the creature shattered. It did not bleed. It did not fall. It simply disintegrated into a million tiny, shimmering shards of crystal and a cloud of gray dust, which hung in the air for a moment before settling on the floor. Where the creature had stood, only the tattered remains of Gavin O'Connell's jumpsuit lay in a heap. For a moment there was a stunned, absolute silence. The groaning of the hull subsided. The water constructs outside the viewport dissolved back into the blackness. The frantic, three-note clicking from the speakers went silent. They had done it. They had won. Then from the drone speakers a new sound, a slow, deliberate, rhythmic pulse. Lena looked at her screen. The drone's camera was still pointed at the great crystal archway at the heart of the cavern, but it was no longer dark. A soft, cold blue light was emanating from within, pulsing in time with the sound. It was the sound of a slow, massive heartbeat. And then the clicking started again. It was not 531. It was not 333. It was a single, repeated click. 1, 1, 1. The chorus had finished its countdown. It had failed to kill them with its puppets. It had failed to break the station with its control of the water. Now it was waking up. Chapter 9. A God of Flesh and Stone. The awakening was not a gentle thing. It was an act of geological violence. The great crystal archway at the heart of the cavern, the source of the chorus, began to fracture. The cold blue light emanating from within intensified, pulsing with the slow, deliberate heartbeat that vibrated through the station's hull. On Lena's screen, the drone's camera feed showed vast, city-block-sized chunks of crystal shearing off the arch and drifting slowly into the abyss. It was not an explosion. It was a shedding, an emergence. "What is that?" Anya's voice was a terrified whisper over the comms. "What's happening?" "It's not just a signal broadcast from the arch," Lena realized, her eyes wide with horrified understanding. "The arch is the creature, or its cocoon, its shell." They had not been dealing with a disembodied voice. They had been living next to a dormant god, and they had just sounded its alarm clock. In the mess hall, Marcus slumped against the wall, his bloody face a pale mask of shock. Tanaka helped him to his feet, his own expression grim. JHA was cautiously emerging from the corridor, staring at the pile of dust that had once been Gavin O'Connell. The immediate threat was gone, but the silence it left behind was filled with an even greater dread. The clicking, Tanaka said, his voice low. One, it's counting down to one, but there are 4 of us left. It's not counting survivors anymore, Lena said, her gaze fixed on the drone feed. It's counting enemies. It thinks there's only one left, me. The one who used the drone, the one who found its frequency. The pulsing heartbeat from the cavern grew stronger, each beat a physical blow against the Tethys. A new series of alarms began to sound, not the sharp klaxons of a hull breach, but the deep, ominous chime of a reactor warning. "Commander," Marcus yelled, his voice rough with pain. "It's the reactor. The geothermal vent is. It's surging. The energy output is going off the charts." "It's drawing power from the vent," Tanaka realized. "It's feeding, using the planet's own energy to fuel whatever it's doing." On Lena's screen, the thing emerging from the shattered archway was beginning to take shape. It was not a single, solid form. It was a colossal, semi-translucent being of shimmering energy and crystalline structures, its anatomy a nightmare of non-Euclidean geometry. Vast, slow-moving tendrils miles long, unfurled into the darkness, their surfaces glittering with what looked like a billion trapped stars. It was beautiful and terrifying, a living constellation being born in the deep. "We can't fight that," JHA stammered, his medical training utterly useless in the face of such a cosmic horror. "We don't have to," Tanaka said, a new, desperate resolve hardening his voice. "We just have to escape." He turned to Anya. "Is there any word from the surface? Any sign of a retrieval team? Faris must know what's happening." "The Janus uplink is still active," Anya reported. "It's sending all this data, but there's no incoming signal. She's not talking, she's just watching." Of course, this was the end game, the final, spectacular data point in her horrific experiment, the specimens being confronted by the awakened anomaly. "Then we save ourselves," Tanaka declared. He looked from face to face, the commander reasserting control in the face of impossible odds. "There's an escape pod, the Triton. It's a deep-sea submersible docked at the aft airlock. It has enough power for a single, one-way trip to the surface." "Faris knows about the pod," Marcus argued, wincing as he clutched his bruised ribs. "She'll have it locked down. There's no way she'd leave us an escape hatch." "She would if she thought we'd never reach it," Tanaka countered. "It's our only chance. Marcus, can you get it powered up remotely from the engineering deck?" Marcus nodded, a flicker of his old, pragmatic self returning. "I can try, but it'll take time, and it'll draw a lot of power, a major drain on a system that's already redlining." "Lena," Tanaka turned to her, "I need a distraction, a big one. You have its attention. You need to keep it focused on you on the station long enough for Marcus to get the Triton ready. Buy us time." Lena looked at the screen, at the vast, star-filled entity unfurling in the deep. Distract a god. It was an insane request, but it was the only request that made sense. "The drone," she said, "the harmonic weapon, it hurt the creature's puppet. maybe it can hurt the creature itself. It's a long shot, Tanaka admitted, but it's the only one we have. JHA, you're with me. We'll help Marcus and secure the docking corridor. Anya, keep all channels open. Let us know the second that thing makes a move for the station. Go. The team scattered, a new, desperate purpose propelling them. Lena was alone in her lab again, the fate of the mission of her friends resting on her shoulders. She took a deep breath, her fingers hovering over the drone controls. She was a biologist. She studied life, and in front of her was the ultimate life form, ancient, vast, intelligent, and she was about to try and kill it. She piloted the drone straight toward the emerging entity. The closer she got, the more impossible its scale became. The Tethys was a gnat buzzing around a mountain. "Okay, you big, beautiful monster," she whispered to herself. "You wanted my attention. You've got it." She armed the sonic emitter again, tuning it to Jansen's frequency. The whine filled her lab. She aimed the drone not at the whole creature, an impossible target, but at one of the glittering, newly formed tendrils. She fired. The beam of pure, focused sound shot from the drone. It was invisible, but its effect was immediate. The section of the tendril it struck shimmered violently. The crystalline structures embedded in its form began to vibrate. A new sound erupted from her speakers. It was not a scream of rage this time. It was a sound of surprise, of curiosity. It was the sound of a giant turning its head to look at a buzzing fly that had just bitten it. The entity's slow, majestic movement ceased. One of its colossal, star-filled tendrils detached from the main body and began to drift with terrifying speed directly toward the station. Toward her. "Anya, it's coming," Lena yelled into her headset. "It's coming right for the biolab." "I see it." Anya's voice was high with panic. "It's so fast." Lena kept firing the sonic beam, but it was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a garden hose. The tendril filled the entire forward view of the station's external cameras. It was not an attack. It was an inspection. The tendril, miles long but impossibly delicate at its tip, came to a halt just inches from the biolab's main viewport. Lena could see the swirling energies within it, the complex lattice of crystal and light. It was looking at her. The god was looking right at her. And then its voice filled her mind. It was not a hijacked voice, not a composite of clicks. It was pure, direct, telepathic communication. A concept, a feeling, a question downloaded directly into her consciousness. "Why do you break the song?" The thought was not hostile. It was genuinely curious. It was the question of a composer asking a child why they were smashing a violin. "Because you're killing us," Lena screamed aloud, her voice sounding thin and useless in the face of the silent, mental voice. "Killing," the thought echoed in her head. "No, I am correcting. You are discordant, imperfect. Your biology is fragile. Your thoughts are chaotic. I offer harmony. I offer permanence. I offer to make you part of the song." A section of the tendril outside the window began to glow. The light intensified and the very fabric of the viewport began to change. The quartz was not cracking. It was dissolving. Its molecular structure was being unwritten, persuaded to become something else. I will not be denied a new instrument, the voice in her head concluded, its tone shifting from curiosity to immutable resolve. I will have you. The viewport dissolved into a cloud of shimmering particles. The abyss rushed in, not with the explosive force of a breach, but with a calm, deliberate flood. Lena was thrown back from her console as the crushing, frigid water of the deep Pacific filled her laboratory. This was not a death of pressure and violence. It was an invitation, a baptism. The god had come to collect its choir master. Chapter 10. The Triton's Ascent. The water was a physical shock, a frigid, crushing weight that stole the air from Lena's lungs. Her survival instincts screamed, but her mind was filled with the overwhelming, calming presence of the chorus. The voice of the entity was everywhere now, a symphony in the water in her bones, promising an end to struggle. It was the most seductive thing she had ever experienced. Just let go, become part of the music, forever. Through the swirling chaos of her flooded lab, she saw the tip of the tendril, a being of pure light and energy, snake through the breached viewport. It was coming for her. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Dr. Milla Jansen's face, her skin covered in the beautiful, terrible crystal, the song of the bones. This was how it happened, not with a scream but with a surrender. No. With a final, defiant act of will, Lena fought back against the psychic lullaby. She kicked her legs, pushing off the wall and scrambled for the lab's emergency hatch. Her lungs were on fire. Black spots danced in her vision. The pressure was a physical pain in her ears, in her skull. The hatch was manual. She wrestled with the lever, her numb fingers fumbling. The tendril was almost upon her, its light bathing her in a serene blue glow. With a final, desperate heave, the hatch swung open and she spilled out into the corridor, gasping, choking, sucking in the precious, recycled air of the station. She slammed the hatch shut just as the tendril touched it. The metal screamed and buckled, but it held. She had escaped, for now. Lena, report. What happened? Tanaka's voice crackled in her earpiece, which had somehow survived the flooding. It breached the lab, she gasped, collapsing against the corridor wall. It's inside the station, it spoke to me. I spoke to you. In my head, it thinks it's saving us, fixing us. She coughed, spitting up salt water. The Triton, is it ready? Almost. Marcus's voice cut in, strained. I'm rerouting the last power conduits. Give me 2 minutes. 2 minutes. It might as well be a lifetime. Lena pushed herself to her feet, her body bruised and shivering. She could still feel the entity's presence, a vast intelligence pressing against the hull, its attention now fully focused on the tiny, defiant organism that had refused its gift. She stumbled down the corridor toward the aft section, toward the escape pod. She had to get to the others. The station was dying around her. Lights flickered erratically. Sections of the ceiling panels fell, revealing sparking wires. The Tethys was having a seizure as the entity outside probed and tested its systems, looking for another way in. She found Tanaka and JHA in the corridor leading to the docking bay. They were holding off a new threat. The station's maintenance drones, small, spider-like robots used for repairs, had been activated. Their single optical sensors now glowed with the same cold, blue light as the entity. They moved with unnatural speed, their manipulator claws snapping menacingly. "It's controlling them," Tanaka yelled, smashing one with a heavy wrench. "It's learning our technology." JHA, armed with a metal rod, swatted another one away. His movements were clumsy but desperate. "We can't hold them off for long." "The Triton is ready," Marcus's voice shouted from the end of the hall. He stood in the open airlock of the escape pod, a sleek, compact submersible barely large enough for four. "Let's go, now." Tanaka smashed another drone. "Go, get in, I'll cover you." JHA didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled down the corridor, dodging the skittering drones. Lena followed, her legs shaky. She glanced back. Tanaka was a whirlwind of motion, a lone soldier fighting a swarm of possessed machines. She reached the airlock, and Marcus pulled her inside the Triton. JHA was already strapping himself into one of the passenger seats. The pod's interior was cramped, filled with the clean smell of ionized air and the low hum of its own power systems. "Where, Tanaka?" Marcus demanded, looking past her. "He's holding them off," Lena said, turning back. She saw Commander Tanaka take down one last drone before turning to run for the pod. But he was too late. From a ruptured conduit in the ceiling, a new tendril of the entity, smaller but just as fast, snaked down. It was not made of light and energy. This one was physical, a biomechanical horror of living cable and crystalline shards, an extension of the station itself, repurposed by the entity. It wrapped around Tanaka's leg. He cried out, stumbling. He tried to pull free, but the tendril held fast. It began to drag him back, away from the airlock. "Kenji!" Lena screamed. Tanaka looked at them, his face a mixture of pain and grim resolve. He knew he wasn't going to make it. He raised his hand, not in a wave, but a clear, unmistakable command. "Seal the door," he ordered, his voice strained but firm. "Go." "No," Marcus yelled, starting to move forward. "That's an order, Cole," Tanaka roared, as the tendril dragged him further into the darkness of the failing station. "Get them out of here. Survive." He twisted his body, pulling a small, cylindrical object from his belt. A thermite flare. With his last ounce of strength, he ignited it and thrust it into the mass of maintenance drones swarming toward the airlock. The flare erupted in a shower of white-hot molten metal, fusing the drones and a section of the corridor into a single, glowing slag heap, buying the Triton precious seconds. Marcus, his face a tear-streaked mask of anguish, slammed his fist on the control panel. "I'm sorry, Commander." The Triton's heavy inner door hissed shut, sealing them in. Through the small viewport, they saw Tanaka one last time, a lone figure being dragged into the dark, consumed by the will of the abyss. Marcus threw himself into the pilot's seat, his movements furious and efficient. Undocking sequence initiated, firing thrusters. The submersible shuddered as magnetic clamps disengaged. Powerful thrusters ignited, pushing them away from the dying Tethys. For a moment, they floated in the abyss, the silent, dark ocean surrounding them. Then they saw it. The Tethys was no longer just a research station. It was becoming part of the entity. The crystalline growths that had claimed O'Connell were now spreading across its hull. Tendrils of light and metal pulsed and grew from its structure. The station was being assimilated, transformed into a new, monstrous appendage for the abyssal god. Its lights flickered one last time and then went dark, replaced by the cold, internal blue glow of the chorus. Ascending, Marcus choked out, pulling back on the controls. The Triton's powerful engines roared to life, and they began to rise. They were leaving the bottom of the world, leaving the monster, leaving their commander behind. They were silent for a long time as the submersible climbed, the darkness outside absolute. They had survived. They were heading for the surface. Lena, her body aching, her mind scarred, looked at the depth gauge. They were rising fast, but the surface was 6 kilometers away. A long, lonely journey through the dark. Then a new light appeared on the console, a proximity alert. "What is that?" JHA asked, his voice trembling. Marcus's face went pale. "Something above us, waiting." He switched on the forward sonar. An image resolved on the screen. It was a submarine, large, military grade. It was positioned directly in their ascent path, silent and dark. "It's a rescue team," JHA said, a wave of relief in his voice. But Lena knew better. She remembered the logs, the lies, the cold, calculating voice of Director Ferris. Ferris wouldn't send a rescue team. She would send a cleanup crew. Marcus seemed to realize it at the same time. He hailed them on the comm. "Unidentified vessel, this is escape submersible Triton, requesting assistance. We are survivors from the Tethys research station." The response was immediate. It was not a voice. It was a single, automated digital tone, a lock-on signal. "They've targeted us," Marcus breathed. On the sonar screen, a new icon appeared, detaching from the waiting submarine. It was small, fast, and moving directly toward them. "A torpedo." "Hold on," Marcus yelled, throwing the Triton into a sharp, evasive dive. The escape was not over. They had fled the monster in the abyss only to find the human monster waiting for them in the dark. Ferris wasn't just watching anymore. She was making sure no witnesses, no discordant notes, ever reached the surface to spoil her perfect, terrible song. Chapter 11. The Devil and the Deep Blue Sea. The torpedo was a predator in the dark. On the sonar screen, its icon was a relentless, homing stiletto aimed at the heart of the Triton. Marcus wrestled with the controls, pushing the small submersible to its absolute limits. The cramped cabin was filled with the groan of stressed metal and the high-pitched whine of an overtaxed reactor. "It's too fast," he yelled, his knuckles white on the yoke. "It's military grade, we're a science pod, we can't outrun it." "Evasive maneuvers," Lena shouted, her mind snapping back into analytical mode. The terror was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but survival demanded logic. "Can we use the environment, thermal layers, wreckage?" "There's nothing here but water," Marcus shot back. "We left the Tethys debris field behind." The proximity alarm screamed, a piercing, incessant shriek. The torpedo was closing. JHA braced himself in his seat, his eyes shut, reciting a quiet prayer. Lena's gaze swept across the console, her eyes catching on a display she hadn't noticed before. It was a secondary sonar, a wide-spectrum passive system, showing not just solid objects but pressure and energy densities. And below them, rising from the crushing depths they had just fled, was a vast, sprawling cloud of energy. It was the chorus, the entity. It wasn't just sitting at the bottom anymore. It was ascending, following them. "Marcus," she yelled, pointing at the display. "Down dive now." "Are you crazy?" he screamed back. "We're trying to get away from that thing." "The torpedo is the immediate threat. Ferris wants us dead. That thing, it wants us alive. It's the lesser of two evils. Dive." It was a horrifying choice. To be vaporized by human malice or to flee into the embrace of an alien god. Marcus hesitated for only a second. Then, with a curse, he shoved the controls forward. The Triton's nose dipped, and they plunged back toward the abyss, back toward the monster. The torpedo, locked onto their heat signature and acoustic profile, followed without deviation. The distance between them shrank. 10 seconds to impact. 5, 3. They hit the edge of the entity's energy field. The water outside the viewport, which had been black, was suddenly filled with the faint, swirling blue light of the chorus. The submersible shuddered as it passed through the invisible barrier. The voice of the entity flooded Lena's mind again, not with words this time, but with a feeling of immense parental disappointment. "You run from perfection." Then the torpedo entered the field behind them. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The torpedo's sophisticated guidance system, a marvel of human engineering, was never designed to operate inside the consciousness of an abyssal god. Its electronic brain was flooded with psychic noise, with the chaotic, beautiful music of the chorus. On the sonar screen, the torpedo's icon went haywire. It veered sharply, its course suddenly erratic. It began to fly in tight, useless circles, its programming shattered. A moment later, its own failsafe systems, detecting a critical malfunction, triggered its self-destruct sequence. A silent, brilliant flash illuminated the deep, followed by a shockwave that slammed into the Triton, sending them tumbling end over end. Alarms blared. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into absolute darkness, save for the faint, ethereal blue glow of the entity outside. "Damage report," Marcus yelled, his voice strained. "Backup power is on," Lena said, her voice shaking as the emergency lights bathed the cabin in a dim, red glow. "But the main reactor is offline. We're dead in the water." They were alive, but they were adrift inside the very thing they had tried to escape. Outside the viewport, the vast, shimmering tendrils of the chorus moved with slow, languid grace. They were no longer hostile. They were curious. They surrounded the small, crippled submersible, studying the strange, hard-shelled creatures who had rejected the song. "They'll just fire another one," JHA whispered, his voice full of despair. "No, they won't," Lena said, her eyes fixed on the entity outside. A new, desperate plan was forming in her mind, a gamble so audacious it bordered on insanity. "Ferris can't risk damaging this. This specimen, the entity, it's what she wanted all along. A live, active anomaly. She won't shoot at us as long as we're inside it." "So what?" Marcus said, his voice flat with exhaustion. "We just wait here until our air runs out. That's not a victory, Lena, it's just a slower death." "No," she countered, her voice gaining strength. "We use it. We use the one weapon we have left." She looked at him, her eyes intense. "Me." She unstrapped herself and moved to the comms panel. "That thing spoke to me. It listens. It understands." "You're going to talk to it?" JHA asked, aghast. "It will absorb you, turn you into that." He gestured vaguely toward the blackness. "It wants harmony," Lena said, her mind racing. "It thinks we're discordant notes in its song. I'm going to give it a new song to listen to, one it's never heard before." She opened a broad-spectrum channel, not voice, but pure data. She began to transmit. She didn't send pleas or threats. She sent science. She sent the periodic table, the double helix structure of DNA, the elegant, immutable laws of thermodynamics, the chaotic, unpredictable beauty of evolution. She sent it the story of life on the surface, a story not of perfect harmony, but of struggle, adaptation, and messy, glorious survival. She was showing it that their discordance was a different kind of music. "This is us," she thought, pouring all her will and intellect into the transmission. "This is our song. It's not perfect. It's loud and chaotic and often painful, but it's ours." Outside, the entity reacted. The slow, curious movements of its tendrils ceased. The blue light intensified. It was listening. It was processing billions of years of terrestrial evolution in a matter of seconds. Then she sent her last piece of data. She sent it everything she had on Director Ferris. The corporate structure of astrogeological dynamics, the Tethys protocol, the lies, the betrayals, the cold, calculated sacrifice of 5 crews. She showed the ancient, abyssal god the face of the true monster, the human one. She showed it the mind of a being whose song was made of pure, selfish avarice, a mind with no harmony at all. This, the thought from the chorus, was no longer a gentle whisper. It was a roar of cold, cosmic fury. It was the sound of a god finally understanding the nature of sacrilege. Is discord. The entity moved. It ignored the Triton completely. The vast, shimmering cloud of its being began to rise, faster and faster, a pillar of vengeful energy ascending through the dark. It was no longer interested in the small, defiant notes in the submersible. It had heard a truly ugly sound from the world above, and it was going to silence it. "What did you do?" Marcus breathed, watching the colossal form vanish into the blackness above. "I think," Lena said, a slow, tired smile spreading across her face, "I just pointed it at a bigger problem." Chapter 12, Surface Tension. The ascent was a long, silent vigil. With the main reactor down, they relied on the Triton's emergency batteries, rising at a painfully slow pace. They had no communication with the surface, no way of knowing what was happening. They could only watch their depth gauge and wait. Hours bled into a day. They conserved power, sitting in the dim, red glow of the emergency lights, the silence broken only by the hum of the air recyclers. They were 3 survivors, adrift in a metal bubble, suspended between the hell they had escaped and a surface they might not recognize. It was Jha who saw it first. "Light," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He was pointing at the viewport. A faint gray twilight was beginning to penetrate the oppressive blackness. As they rose, it grew brighter, shifting from gray to a deep, murky blue. They were nearing the surface. Marcus managed to get a low-power sonar ping to work. "There's nothing up there," he said, his voice a mixture of relief and confusion. "The corporate vessel, the sub, they're gone." They broke the surface in the middle of a calm, gray dawn. The sea was a sheet of glass, the sky overcast. The world was quiet, too quiet. Marcus cracked the hatch, and the smell of salt and clean, open air filled the cabin. It was the most beautiful thing Lena had ever smelled. They climbed out onto the deck of the small submersible, three ghosts returning to the world of the living. In the distance, on the horizon, a plume of black smoke stained the gray sky. It took another hour for the rescue vessel to find them. It wasn't a corporate ship. It was a Coast Guard cutter, its crew looking at them with a mixture of awe and pity. As they were brought on board, wrapped in blankets and given hot coffee, the story began to trickle out. There had been an incident. A state-of-the-art corporate research vessel, the AGD Endeavour, and its escort, a private military submarine, had vanished from all tracking systems roughly 24 hours earlier. They were gone. No debris, no distress call, just gone. The official story was a suspected experimental reactor failure. But Lena, Marcus, and Jha knew the truth. The chorus had come to the surface. It had found the source of the discord. It had found Director Faris, and it had corrected her. Their debriefing was a long, strange process. They were heroes and liabilities at the same time. Their story was too fantastic, too unbelievable. A sentient, psychic, abyssal entity. It was the stuff of fiction. They told a simplified version of the truth. A massive, unexplained geological event. A station failure. A miraculous escape. They omitted the God in the deep. The world wasn't ready for that truth. Maybe it never would be. The Tethys Protocol was buried under a mountain of corporate litigation and non-disclosure agreements. Astrogeological dynamics collapsed overnight, its stock plummeting to zero after the loss of its flagship vessel and its enigmatic director. The names of the dead, Tanaka, O'Connell, and the crews of the 4 stations before them, were consigned to a classified file, footnotes in a story no one would ever be told. Life went on, but for the 3 survivors of the Tethys, the world was never the same. Jha retired, moving to a quiet cabin in the mountains, as far from the ocean as he could get. He dedicated his life to counseling trauma survivors, his own quiet way of honoring the man who had died in his med bay. Marcus went back to engineering, but he never worked on a submersible again. He built bridges, structures that stood in the open air, solid and dependable, their foundations on dry land. Sometimes, late at night, he would wake up shouting Tanaka's name. And Lena went back to the sea. She couldn't stay away. She took a position at a coastal oceanographic institute, studying tidal patterns and plankton blooms. She never spoke of what she had seen. She never mentioned the voice that had once filled her head. But sometimes, on clear, quiet nights, She would walk to the edge of the ocean and just listen. The waves on the shore were no longer just the sound of water. They were the edge of a conversation, the faint echo of a song being sung in the deep. The chorus was still down there. It was ancient and vast, and it was aware. She had shown it the chaos and beauty of their world. She had shown it the capacity for human evil, and she had shown it that some discordant notes were worth fighting for. She didn't know if it was a friend or a foe, a savior or a slumbering threat. She only knew that it was there, a god of flesh and stone, watching from the bottom of the world. And she, the biologist, the survivor, the woman who had argued with a god and lived, was its sole, silent ambassador on the surface. She would spend the rest of her life listening, waiting for the day the song would start again. The end.